Money in the Bank season is always an exciting time to be a WWE fan. You've got months of debating who should win the briefcases. Then you've got the qualifying matches to see who gets in the actual match. And then finally you get the entire field for the men and the women for who can potentially become the next winners of the contract. And there's always just a lot of buzz that comes with the entire concept. It's a big deal. And so I thought it would be fun to go back and look and rank all 33 separate times a WWE superstar has held the Money in the Bank briefcase. So obviously this is just a totally subjective list, and you can let me know your favorite and your least favorite contract holders in the comments below. And for me personally, this was kind of highlighted when I went back and looked at a lot of these reigns that these people had with the Money in the Bank contract, is that I'm kind of over this as like a yearly type thing. I think that they should maybe take a break for a year or two, because a lot of times it feels like they don't have a concrete plan for a lot of these people. They just kind of give them the briefcase and they're like, okay, we'll figure it out, and they don't build them up at all. And so I think that's kind of hurt a lot of these reigns. And there's a lot of bad ones. There are some top tier and very good ones, but there are also a lot of bad ones. And so this is not going to count anything really that they did before winning the briefcase, and we're not going to count anything that happens after the cash in. We are just going from right when they win the Money in the Bank briefcase and then the cash in, and that's it. And so we're not taking into account any, their push after the fact, or if their title reign was good or not, or anything like that at all. So we're just going to go from Money in the Bank win to Money in the Bank cash in, and we're going to rank it based on that and just the overall quality of what they do with the briefcase. And look, I know that a lot of people are going to get mad at me for the lowest ranked guy on this list, number 33. And, because people like him, and he's pretty over right now in WWE. But number 33 is going to be Otis. I mean, this is kind of the perfect example of not having any plans for someone after winning the briefcase. At least for me, I couldn't ever imagine Otis as a world champion. And I get it was the pandemic era, so things were just wild in general. They were just doing whatever. But this really was never going to work for me personally. He won it by accident, and he did literally nothing interesting with it. I know people considered him maybe cashing in for the tag team titles with his partner at the time, and that also just devalues the briefcase. If you have a briefcase for any title shot, you would think you'd want to take the world. But yeah, he did nothing interesting at all, and then he lost it to Miz at Hell in the Cell. Taking all that into consideration, it just makes for the worst Money in the Bank run ever. He held it for 168 days and did genuinely nothing with it. So, for me, at least, maybe time to reconsider doing this match every year if you have to put it on Otis, like I said. So there are a lot of bad runs that are coming up that you could maybe put last, but this one for me just has to be last, personally. Moving on, number 32, we have Baron Corbin, and nobody wanted this at the time, and it still doesn't really make sense looking back at it, unless they just totally planned on torpedoing Corbin down the card at the time of him winning it. He only held it for 58 days, so it was a little shorter than Otis. And then he just decided to cash in on WWE Champion Jinder Mahal. That is, once again, WWE Champion Jinder Mahal. It seems like an easy win, right? Jinder is laid out and worn down from a previous match, and he seems like easy pickings. Well, that would be absolutely wrong, because John Cena distracts Corbin and allows Jinder to roll Corbin up for the win and the failed cash-in. And it's just an absolutely brutal way to lose and a total burial of Corbin, which I have never been a Corbin fan, but come on, why give him the briefcase at all just to do that? I think there was some stat where it was Jinder Mahal retaining this was the quickest failed cash-in, or quickest WWE title defense of all time or something like that. So just a total absolute waste of the briefcase. Nobody wanted it on him at the time. I still don't really understand what they were going for. It didn't really make any sense. So one of these scenarios where they just put it on somebody, don't have a plan, and then just decide to absolutely bury them just beneath the earth. And it took a long time to even rehab him, to even make him respected in the fans' eyes, I think he is now after his NXT run with Braun Breaker. But yeah, once again, did nothing with the briefcase and lost in the most embarrassing fashion possible. So that's why this is so low. At number 30, won, and this is truly remarkable, and just a showcase of how bad some of these runs with the Money in the Bank briefcase, like, they're just such a shit show of a run that this is not ranked dead last. And number 31, we have Austin Theory, which was just Theory at the time. So I get that Theory, and honestly, a lot of people probably had this last, which I wouldn't blame you, but I get that Theory was a VKM project, and Triple H wasn't really into him at the time, but they could have at least tried. So Theory, if you don't remember this, Theory's entire 129-day story with the briefcase was just getting humiliated over and over again during cash-in attempts. So he would just find various ways to not be able to cash in. And eventually he thought, I can never beat Roman, right? So let me cash in on Seth for the US title, which just... I mean, I think this is the first time that anybody ever even thought like that. Like, let me cash in for a secondary title that nobody cares about. So that's just horrendous by itself. But imagine holding a guaranteed shot at any championship and not challenging for the most prestigious title. I mean, it's just crazy. And then he goes to cash in against Seth, and he loses his cash in for the U.S. title against Seth due to Lashley interference. I mean... And then he won the title like a few weeks later. So what was the point of failing to cash in the first place? Going back to this was just truly a showcase for how to absolutely bury someone beneath the ground. And the jury's still out on if Theory can even be repaired after this. But again, we aren't taking that into consideration. But during the time that this actually happened, I mean, it was just absolutely brutal. I mean, I don't know how you could try and make someone look any worse. I know he's a heel, but come on. At number 30, this one may be the most frustrating for me personally. And number 30 is Damian Sandow, and I really just hated at the time what they did to him with this briefcase, and I still think it was kind of a mistake. I personally think he had legit, like, upper mid-card main event heel upside, and they just completely destroyed that with this run for no reason. He had an excellent design for the briefcase. It was one of the better ones that you'll see. He had it was like a suitcase kind of deal, and it was a good design. And then he actually had a feud over it with Cody Rhodes, which is kind of funny at the time, and it sounds like a setup for a memorable and good cash-in, right? They built him up. He even had a feud over it. So once again, wrong. I mean, Sandow's entire gimmick was being intelligent, and they had him cash in on a fresh John Cena on a random edition of Raw. I don't even remember. It was just literally a random Raw. And he attacked him before cashing in, and he still lost clean as a fucking sheet. I mean, it was one of the... So a lot of people give Cena respect now, and they say he's one of the greats, which he is, but people kind of want to skate and skirt over Super Cena was actually a legit thing back then. And this was one of the worst examples of Super Cena. And they just completely butchered Sandow because of it. And it still makes me incredibly annoyed to this day. Like, obviously Sandow didn't really work out to that level, and I think as a performer overall, he probably wasn't at that level, but at this specific time, he was super hot. He was really over. And the main reason he wasn't given a run was because they were ultimately unifying the two belts into one, and he wasn't a big enough star to be the one world champion, because this was when they were unifying it, and they had the WWE and the world title, the two belt gimmick. So I understand he wasn't a big enough star for that, but I still can't really endorse this, and I'm still just overall disappointed looking back on this. I think that this is definitely a missed opportunity of a run, and one of the more frustrating, because I do think he had upside to be way more than what he eventually was in his time in the WWE. Number 29 is Braun Strowman, and this one is so funny because WWE really had no idea what to do with an organically over as hell babyface that is just, I mean, he's just a monster. He's like, 6'8", 350 or whatever. And he's pretty much anything they could ever want and a top monster in the company. And however, they decided to do tons of damage to him with this 70-day reign before the cash-in. So first of all, why does he even need the briefcase? Like, why would this character ever need the briefcase? I guess Kane is an example of the briefcase working, but he immediately cashed in the same night. So why a monster face or heel like this guy does not need a briefcase, really? It just makes no sense. Second, the reunited Shield stopped his first cash-in attempt. So, okay, whatever. He then cashes in advance at Hell in a Cell against Roman, which is fine, I guess. Cashing in advance, monster babyface kind of makes sense or whatever. But that results in a no contest because Brock interferes. And so that cash-in just gets ruined. The main event of a pay-per-view gets ruined. And then he just moves away from the title scene and turns heel. I mean, what are we doing? Why did we do this? I genuinely have no idea what they were thinking with this one, but whatever it produced, whatever they were thinking, it just produced not good results on screen. It it was just very, very bad and did nothing for Braun Strowman in the end. Number 28 is John Cena, and honestly, the only reason this one is this high is because it's pretty inoffensive, all things considered, and it gave us the incredible memes with Cena's face holding the red Money in the Bank briefcase with his goofy-ass face. That's really the only reason that it's this high. That alone just gives it a special place in my heart. But he only held it for 8 days and lost his cash-in due to Big Show interfering at Raw 1000. So overall, this did have a purpose as Cena continued his bad year arc that he was having at the time, and it gave CM Punk some juice as a heel ahead of his series with The Rock several months later. But the actual Money in the Bank aspect of this wasn't anything worthwhile. So I don't think this really damaged anybody or anything, but it was kind of fine for storyline purposes. But again, this is one of the things that Money in the Bank, you did not need Money in the Bank for this. You did not need to give John Cena Money in the Bank for this. He could have just won a random match or challenged Punk for the title to continue his arc. You did not need a Money in the Bank briefcase for John Cena. So that's mainly the main reason that this is this low. But number 27, and this is the theme here for me, is if this is the last one of these that did not cash in successfully. And I just think you have to be at the bottom of this list if you didn't cash in and win the world title. Everybody ahead of this person cashed in and won. So at least they won a world title. Everybody below him did not. So number 27 is Mr. Kennedy. And this is the highest ranked of these failed cash in or contract losses because Kennedy lost his contract to Edge, Otis lost it to The Miz, and everybody else below this just straight up lost their cash in. So one of the main reasons being that this is a massive topic of what if. We really have no idea where this was going. The ones listed previously were decided upon direction that WWE wanted to take the briefcase for that specific run. For this one, I do believe that Kennedy ultimately was going to win the WWE or the World Heavyweight Championship due to the fact they had been setting him up for a rocket strap, and they were just pushing him to the moon. However, 24 hours after the case was hotshotted onto Edge so Kennedy could get surgery, he was told by a doctor that 9 months on the shelf was more like 5 to 6 weeks. So he got pretty fucking screwed in this run. The original idea that they presented was Kennedy was going to wait the entire year before cashing in at WrestleMania, which honestly, smart in kayfabe. Why do more people not just say this? Because you literally could just guarantee yourself the main event of WrestleMania. But we only got 36 days of this before he lost the contract to Edge. So I just put this one the highest because I think it had the most potential, and I really do think that they were going to give Kennedy the win. I don't really think there's any way he was going to actually lose if he cashed in the briefcase, but that's just off of what ifs, and you can't really place it any higher than people who actually won the title and cashed in successfully, so that's why he is this low. Moving on to number 26, and this is the first person who successfully cashed in their Money in the Bank contract. And this is much like the Otis situation for me. And number 26 is Nikki ASH. And I just can't imagine the world title being on fucking Nikki ASH. And I don't have to imagine because it happened. I just genuinely, what was the point of this? I guess it was for the pop of her cashing in the very next night and to lose it in like a month back to Charlotte. The character isn't even around anymore, and it was never meant to be taken seriously, so why did they even have her win the Money in the Bank and successfully cash in? Like, I really don't get it. The only reason she's this high is because she actually won the title, unlike the people above her, like I said. So, to me, things like this just devalue the concept and really just lower the prestige and the excitement around it. And I suppose we were lucky that she only had the contract for 24 hours, but this is another common issue with specifically the women who won the Money in the Bank contract is that they don't hold it very long. And I think that's another negative against the concept is that they just don't have long-term plans for it. But number 25 is Alberto Del Rio. And taking out the obvious reasons for thinking Del Rio sucks and is just an awful person in general and just a total clown, this was even perplexing at the time. WB always tried to push Del Rio and make him a bigger deal than he was, and I didn't understand it at the time either. Del Rio's cash-in happened at the wrong time as it ruined the summer of Punk, essentially. Like, no one wanted Del Rio as the champion at this point, and he never really had a good run with the world title in WWE. On top of that, this cash-in was just really strange. Not only did a random Kevin Nash appear to beat up Punk, but then Del Rio just hit an Insiguri to beat Punk. It was just very strange. Like, go back and watch this. It was so weird. He then held the title for 35 days and dropped it back to Cena, who then dropped it back to Del Rio 14 days after that, who then dropped it to Punk, and that is where Punk had his infamous 434-day run with the championship. So This was just very weird, and it didn't elevate Del Rio at all because he sucked, and he only held the briefcase for 28 days. So that's why this one is so low, on top of the fact that Alberto Del Rio just sucks. Number 24, and you probably thought I forgot about this guy because you would think he would be even lower than this. And 24 is Jack Swagger. And Swagger winning this is really, it just defined the era of, well, we don't have anyone better to pick, so we'll just try someone from the mid-card and not really have a plan for them. So I went back and looked at his cage match for this time, and he really wasn't doing anything or being built to win the briefcase at all, or even specifically let alone win the title. He had an alright look, but his promo skills were just awful, and even though he was technically fine in the ring, he just wasn't world champion caliber. Maybe this was just another example of Chris Jericho pushing for his buddy to win the world title off of him, and that's why they went with it. He won the 2010 Money in the Bank ladder match and then cashed in on the following SmackDown 5 days later. Again, crazy that he's this high, but that just shows how many truly awful decisions they made with this stipulation in general. I mean, at least his run was short and they were trying to make a guy. I mean, but it was just not the right one. Number 23 is Liv Morgan, and this might feel too low considering the actual reaction in the building to the cash-in was pretty good, and people were excited for it. The lead-up booking was also very solid. As Liv won all of her matches in the weeks lead up to the event, and then she went on to win the Money in the Bank and the title. So they built her up strong, and she won the title. So what's wrong with it? For me, at this point, I was just incredibly annoyed by WB having almost every women's Money in the Bank winner cashing in on the same night and nobody having a viable run with it. She didn't even have the case for 2 hours. It just became a tired trope for me, like specifically the women's case at this time. And I'm really just not personally a Liv Morgan fan, and I just felt she really wasn't ready at the time. And ultimately, to me, this really didn't elevate her to any new levels at the time of the cash-in. I know people at the time were saying she's really elevated and this is a great moment. For me, I didn't really feel that. It was a good pop. Money in the Bank cash-in is always going to get a pop because it's exciting, but it was just kind of a real encapsulation, and it was just really of just the frustration that I was feeling with the actual contracts at the time. They were just not very important and didn't really do much. So, and hers is my least favorite of the same night women's cash-in. So that's the reason that she's at 23 for me. Coming in at number 22 on this list, we have Asuka, and I do understand the point of her winning this at the time. It was to provide a stable champion since Becky Lynch had to vacate the title due to her pregnancy, and they just wanted to easily transition it to Asuka and provide a sweet moment on Raw. And it was a great segment, but she didn't even cash in. This is kind of another rare exception for the briefcase. And so the cash-in is always one of the better moments of the entire concept, and we didn't get that for this one. On top of that, Asuka was already a pretty popular name and a former champion, and to me, it felt like Shayna Baszler should have won the title around this time, and they could have elevated her instead of just playing it safe. So I wasn't really sure where to put this, but this felt like a fine spot, considering that this was more of a vehicle to transition champions in a unique way more than an actual Money in the Bank winner. And so they really had that in mind when they decided who was winning this. And so it was more really for the title than for the Money in the Bank contract, but technically considered a winner, so had to throw it on here, and I think it's better utilized than Liv Morgan's in general, so that's why it's one spot ahead of her. At 21, we have The Miz from 2020, and The Miz's second Money in the Bank win is mainly rated this high because I was happy when he beat Otis for it. I was just excited that Otis lost it. For his second run with the contract, he took the case from Otis, and then he held it for 119 days before cashing in to beat Drew McIntyre for the title. He would then serve as a transitional champion before Bobby Lashley took the championship from him shortly after. So this kind of run with the briefcase was essentially another example of them not having any long-term plans. They put it on Otis, realized they didn't really want him to challenge for the title. Then they gave it to Miz and made him a transitional champion. They wanted to go from Drew to Lashley, but they didn't want Lashley to just straight up beat Drew already. So they just used Miz, and it was a fine use for what they had the story. It was a fine use for what they had set themselves up for, and it was an effective twist in the story involving the WWE Championship, at least at the time, but it's overall a disappointing use of something that can be used to create a new star, and I feel like that is mainly what is lost a lot of these years, is that they just don't use it effectively to try and create new stars or to elevate people. It's just kind of we'll just do it with this, but not every run can be a slam dunk, but I feel like a lot of these are just, middling or real bad. But yeah, anyway, Miz is 21 overall on this list for his 2020 run with it. We're now at number 20, and we have yet to find a good run yet. So number 20 is Sheamus, so that streak is going to continue. People were happy that Sheamus cashed in successfully, and that was for one reason and one reason only. He was not Roman Reigns. If you're a newer WWE fan, it's pretty unbelievable how hated Roman Reigns was back when he first started, which, everybody understands if you're watching at the time. I don't think anybody really enjoyed Roman Reigns just being forced down our throats. But Sheamus cashed in after 161 days of holding the contract at Survivor Series after Roman Reigns won the title in the main event. He then formed the League of Nations the following Raw and was set up as a main event heel champion. We're not really going to focus on that. I just wanted to remind people that the League of Nations was a thing, and it definitely existed. So Sheamus was booked fine, I suppose, during his run as Money in the Bank holder. He was trading wins with people like Dean Ambrose and Randy Orton throughout. He did lose to some lower card babyfaces earlier in the night of the Survivor Series when he won the titles, Jey Uso and Kalisto in particular. I think Ryback was also on that team, but it was just, that specifically is one of the main things I hate about the booking for Money in the Bank winners. They just don't protect them at all. They're like, they have the Money in the Bank contract, so they're protected. It's like, well, no, let's actually build them up. But this was the definition of a middling run, but at least he had decent booking, held the briefcase for a while, and then successfully cashed in to set up something. Even if the story wasn't particularly good afterwards, he had just a very short run with it. But I guess at least they had plans and a faction for him, so that's more than you can say for a lot of these other people. But yeah, Sheamus is number 20 on the list. I would still say a bad run personally, but
Number 19, we've got Bayley. This kind of begins the run of people who cashed in on the same night that they won their Money in the Bank match. Bayley only waited 85 minutes before cashing in on a weakened Charlotte Flair to capture the SmackDown Women's Championship. And this is kind of just going mainly off memory. I feel like this was kind of like a fan service move since they had Becky Lynch lose one of her 2 titles here, and they kind of wanted to give the fans something to help lessen the blow of Becky 2 belts, only having 1 now. And the cash-in was pretty solid itself, and it absolutely served a purpose of setting up like a long-term program between Flair and Bayley on SmackDown over the title for a little bit. But, at least for me, I can only put the 85-minute long run of this Money in the Bank contract so high up. And so the cash-in was effective and the storyline setting up was effective, but I feel like when you look back on these wins and these runs with the briefcases, that you're not really going to be overly excited or remember really much about Bayley's. This is another one that's going to be like this. Waiting slightly longer than Bayley to cash in was number 18, Alexa Bliss, clocking in at 172 minutes before she cashed in on Nia Jax and got a great reaction from the crowd at 2018 Money in the Bank pay-per-view. This was the first of the super quick women's cash-ins because Carmella won the previous year and she waited a long time to cash in, and this was the first one, and it probably got the best reaction. I would say it got a little bit better than Bayley, so that's why it's a little bit higher than the others for me. I was also just a very big Alexa Bliss fan at the time, and I remember it fondly. It was also kind of like a unique cash-in because she didn't cash in during the match, and she didn't cash in necessarily after the match. She did, but she caused a DQ and then cashed in after taking out Ronda Rousey. And then she just took advantage of the injured arm of Nia Jax. So it was a nice little touch. And like I said, this was before the run of like 4 women's Money in the Bank holders immediately cashing in. And it wasn't really a trope yet. So that made this a little bit more enjoyable for me. And overall, I just appreciated what they did with the briefcase for this specific time. And that's why this one is at 18 for me. Number 17, we had Kane. And he had even less time in between his ladder match and the world title win. And he only waited 49 minutes before cashing in on poor Rey Mysterio and ending his title run. I feel like I'm more positive on this quick cash-in for a few reasons. And one, it was the first same-night cash-in to occur, and it was fairly shocking at the time. And number 2, it's fucking Kane, the Big Red Machine, baby. This is the type of character that, I mean, he's just not going to like calculate and wait for the perfect time. He's just going to go in there and immediately cash in, beat the shit out of the champion, and win the title. Granted, he did take advantage after the match, and it was Rey Mysterio, so he definitely kind of picked his spot there, but you get my point that his character is not going to be sitting in the back, you know, with his briefcase waiting for his like music to hit and for a specific occurrence to happen. So the whole 1 year element of the stipulation has always been positioned as the biggest advantage to winning, but this quick cash-in strategy worked for him and for WWE whenever they needed easy pops, and it was just stolen by several of the other winners lower than him. So this was the first one that was kind of the super quick turnaround, and that's why I rank it higher than most, I would imagine. Can't imagine most people have Kane's cash-in ranked higher, but the world title run that he had after the fact, obviously not good, but that we're not really taking that into consideration once again. And so the actual brief time he had the briefcase, I enjoyed what they did with it and how they set it up. Number 16, we've got Io Sky, currently the second longest reigning women's Money in the Bank holder at 36 days. I mean, come on, but Io didn't really do much during this reign. She won the match and got the contract, lost to Charlotte Flair and Zelina Vega on different SmackDowns a few weeks apart, and then she cashed in and beat Bianca Belair at SummerSlam. The actual cash-in itself was excellent. I'm glad they really, allowed her to keep the briefcase for more than just a single night, but they didn't really do anything in the extra time frame to really build her up as a more credible champion. So her beating Bianca and having that SummerSlam moment really keeps this middle of the pack for the list, but hopefully they continue to move in the right direction regarding having meaningful Money in the Bank runs for the women in the company, because as has been highlighted, they really haven't at all. Like I said, this Io Sky reign was the second longest behind Carmella at 36 days, and Carmella's was like 200 and something. So yeah, I hope they continue to trend upward in this regards. But yeah, this Io Sky reign, I would say, pretty smack dab in the middle of the pack for this run. Number 15 is Randy Orton, and I hated this in real time, obviously, because I was very into Daniel Bryan and just wanted him to be champion. But looking back on it, Orton winning and cashing in on Bryan to further the story of Bryan getting screwed ultimately helped make the story as satisfying as it ended up being when Bryan finally conquered the evil authority at WrestleMania 30. So this Money in the Bank win and cash in helped propel that, so it definitely deserves points for that. Orton was also pushed very well leading up to this, as he racked up a ton of wins on television leading up to SummerSlam 2013. This was somewhat of a shorter run with the contract, clocking in at 35 days, but it was very effective for what it was. The only reason it's not higher up is because I'm overall not like a massive Randy Orton fan, and he's never been like super entertaining or captivating to me, which lowers my enjoyment of anything he does overall. Like, obviously you gotta respect the longevity of Orton and everything he's done in the business, but for me personally, he's never really garnered up tons of excitement or interest into anything he does, even to this day. So that lowers this reign overall for me. But in terms of effectiveness and what it ultimately led to and what happened during the briefcase when he held it, this obviously has to be decently high for me. Number 14 is Brock Lesnar, and what an absurd run from Lesnar. I mean, this was so weird. His initial winning the briefcase was incredibly stupid and made literally no sense at all. Mustafa Ali just sat there grabbing the brief, and instead of grabbing the briefcase and winning as Lesnar entered the match, he just sat there and didn't do anything. But it quickly turned into one of the more entertaining runs with the briefcase ever, and it resulted in the birth of Beatbox Brock. So I mean, how can you hate it, really? He also had no idea how the Money in the Bank worked and had this interaction with Paul Heyman. So let me just quote this. "I've got a year to cash in. Didn't you know? No. How did you not know?" Man, that was very funny. The entire 56 days of the Brock party were very entertaining and unexpected from someone we never really seen do comedy to that level. The only other negatives to Lesnar winning the Money in the Bank briefcase was that he obviously didn't need to do it, or didn't need it, and ultimately his cash-in was kind of dumb, but the fun value of this definitely gets it higher than a lot of the others on this list. So entertainment-wise, it was definitely higher up. Did he need this? No. Did they really do anything fun with it? No. But Lesnar made his time with the briefcase fun, and it resulted in him becoming the champion. So I think for me personally, this is decently high just because of the entertainment value alone, which is ultimately what we're really ranking on, right? Like, there's no objectivity to this. But yeah, so Lesnar's 14 for me. And I know I said before that I couldn't rank someone who had such a short amount of time with the briefcase this high, but number 13, Dean Ambrose, is a special exception for me. He only held this for 57 minutes, but the entire build-up of the night that led to Ambrose cashing in and winning the WWE Championship was incredibly satisfying to me and is one of my personal favorites. The story of the night was the overdue ascension of Dean Ambrose as the final member of the Shield to win the WWE title, and is rather fittingly seconds after Seth Rollins had dethroned Roman Reigns. Beyond just a great moment for a great wrestler, the cash-in allowed for an awesome bit of lore for the Shield. By the end of Money in the Bank 2016, all three men had been WWE champion on the very same night. I just think that when you look back on this and have that historic bit of trivia for one of the greatest factions in WWE history, and how awesome the moment was and the chaos between Roman being champion, then Seth winning, and then you hear Ambrose's music hit, I just really think it boosts this Money in the Bank run up, even though it didn't last very long. So it's incredibly historic, and I think it deserves this high of a spot, despite how short it was. When something like that contributes to the history of wrestling and the history of WWE and that type of aspect, like, this is always going to be something that's remembered and always something that's looked back on fondly. It was a great moment. I just think that it deserves to be this high, and for me personally, that's why it's 13 on the list. At number 12, I do have the most recent cash-in, and one of the longest holders of Money in the Bank at 282 days. I believe he is the 5th longest as of 2024, and that's Damian Priest. Priest had an interesting run as senior Money in the Bank. For a long portion of it, he was a tag team champion with Finn Balor and wasn't pushed super hard as a singles guy. Some people kind of even compared it to Theory's run previously as someone who constantly failed to cash in, and he teased it for a long time but never did. His saving grace here is that he was generally protected and established as a champion before his cash-in, and the actual cash-in at WrestleMania 40 is one of the best moments in recent memory for shock value and got a massive pop in the building. I don't really think many people were super surprised that he cashed in. I feel like a lot of the discussion and the discourse around WrestleMania 40 was who and when Priest was going to cash in, but it was still surprising to see exactly how it unfolded, with Drew winning the title and Punk kind of costing him. But the actual cash-in got a massive pop, and it was really, really over in the building. Nobody really knew how it would break down, and if he would even cash in successfully. Some people thought that he might not even cash in and win the title, but this might be considered recency bias, and, at least in my opinion, his world title reign hasn't done a great job of elevating him to be a legit main eventer. But I do believe he was decently built, and the moment at Mania was incredible. So that's why this reign is at number 12 for me, and why it might be higher than you think. Number 11, we have The Miz, 2010, so his first time he had the briefcase. The Miz is a special one. He is one of only 3 people to have held the briefcase twice, but unlike those two, while his cash-ins were good, they never felt quite legendary or iconic, so that keeps him a little lower on the list overall. This cash-in with him is pretty good, though. It's taking advantage and jumping at the opportunity of a weakened and injured Randy Orton by the Nexus, and winning the championship after holding the briefcase for 127 days. He really felt like a bigger deal with the briefcase, and after cashing in, he even got to main event WrestleMania. He was also just built up very well prior to this moment, and he was absolutely considered a heel worth gambling on at the time of him winning the title. Obviously, he didn't work out in the long term as a top shelf heel, but he has built out a great career for himself, and this helped establish that. And, if things maybe broke or worked out a little bit better, maybe we could have looked back on this moment even fonder because of it elevating him to a main event status for a long time. But they really did treat him with respect, and this cash-in was really good. His overall run with the briefcase was solid, so there's really nothing to complain about with this cash-in. It's just legendary or iconic. It was just really good, and it didn't really jumpstart anything. So that's why it's number 11 on the list for me. Moving into the top 10, the illustrious top 10, we have got Daniel Bryan at number 10. After defying the odds somewhat with a victory in 2011, Bryan initially pledged to wait until WrestleMania to maximize the scope of his opportunity. However, after 154 days, he turned fully heel and cashed in on a laid-out Big Show only mere seconds after he won the World Heavyweight Championship for the first time in his career. The turn was good, the change of character was good, and it also led to some good promos and matches. Now, of course, most people remember this. They remember this as the eventual lead up to his 18-second world title loss to Sheamus at WrestleMania. But like I've said before, it isn't part of the discussion. So I love this because this was really the start of heel Bryan doing the yes chants that eventually defined a lot of his career. And it's just another example of WWE not fully committing to Brian, and Brian being just too fucking good to be denied, and ultimately leading him to becoming the biggest babyface in the company. This really was the start of Brian's ascension and being incredible in every role that he was given. Examples of this is just being like this heel run right here, Team Hell No, the ultimate babyface, and, against the Authority, and even his heel run after coming back from retirement. Those are just to name a few. I mean, he was just incredible in every single role and every opportunity he was given. So I just think everything is executed very well during this heel run with this briefcase. And I just think it leads to a important moment in history, and that's the ascension of Daniel Bryan up the card. And at number 9, this is going to be probably a controversial opinion, and this is Edge 2007. Now, this one is a weird one to rank for me because it's such a short run. It's only at 4 days, and it obviously wasn't the original plan, but it's an Edge cash-in, and it's still pretty iconic in that regard. It's also just unique. He won the briefcase from an injured Mr. Kennedy on Raw and took the contract to the very next SmackDown and cashed in on The Undertaker after he had just been killed by Mark Henry following a grueling cage match. The entire cash-in was incredibly slimy and just really solidified Edge's character as the ultimate opportunist, since he didn't even win the actual briefcase in the match. He just kind of stole it from Kennedy, and then he stole the world title after a cage match. It was truly just a brilliant use of the contract in general, perfectly executed use of the briefcase, just not Edge's best cash-in overall, and not his best run with it, because I do think his first and the original Money in the Bank run was better. That'll be coming up a little bit later on the list, but for me personally, I just don't hold this one as high in regard due to the fact that it wasn't the original plan and it was so short. It was effective, but ultimately I don't think of this one when I think of Edge's briefcase cash-in, if that makes sense. So that's why it's number 9. All right, and at number 8, we have Carmella. And yes, Carmella had a better run as Miss Money in the Bank than Edge in 2007. Fight me. It is what it is. That's my opinion. But she was the first female winner, and she also held the longest time at 287 days. This is still easily the best women's cash-in, in my opinion, and she actually had a consistent story and tons of different teases during her long reign with it. This whole run essentially primed Carmella to become a star during this time of SmackDown, but they fumbled her championship run, and she never really recaptured the magic she had while being Miss Money in the Bank. Granted, I don't think she was ever going to be like a top-tier worker for her to become a big star in the division, but I do feel like they should have elevated her to at least a higher spot than she fell into during her career. It did start with the weird James Ellsworth winning her the match and then having to redo the match and just giving her the win anyway, but it didn't really affect it too negatively for me. This run still remains her peak on the main roster all these years later, and I'll always have this ranked very high compared to most probably. I just feel like it's really historic. Obviously, she's the first women's Money in the Bank winner, and then she had a long reign with it. She cashed in. The cash-in was really good. She had a good storyline with it, and she was just built up pretty well. So, I mean, at least for me, I think this was a really good run, and it's just, like I said, historic. So I feel like it deserves the spot, and I feel like it deserves a spot at number 8. Is it better than Edge's 2007 run? I'll say yes, because I have it ranked higher, and that one was so short. So, yeah, whatever. Fight me. Carmella's 8 over Edge. Number 7 is CM Punk from 2008. As the second man to win the Money in the Bank twice, Punk's first run lasted 92 days after he cashed in on a beaten-down Edge on a Monday Night Raw episode to win his first World Heavyweight Championship. Punk has had 2 very iconic cash-ins. I just prefer the one the following year as opposed to this one. He was booked decently with the briefcase during this run. Just as an example, I'm pretty sure he made the finals of the King of the Ring tournament, and he was essentially being used across all the different brands. He was on Raw, ECW, and SmackDown, so he was definitely a pushed guy. But like many others, he wasn't like overly protected and was essentially treated like a mid-card guy since they knew he'd be winning the world title down the line. The cash-in for this is incredibly good, and that counts for a lot, so that's why he's this high on the list. And it just really began his ascension up the top of the card. Now, I don't think that he really was completely elevated until the following year when he actually won and turned heel, but yeah, so that's why this one, it's high, but it's not, it's kind of like falls into the Edge category where I just prefer another run that he had with the briefcase as opposed to this one from 2008. So he's number 7. At number 6, we've got RVD. RVD held it for 70 days, and I love everything that RVD as the Money in the Bank holder created. You know, RVD was the first man to announce in advance when he would cash in at ECW One Night Stand 2006, and no one has done it better since. Besides just winning the title, the whole context around it really elevates this entire run and this specific moment where he cashed in. The arena, his opponent being John Cena, the entire ECW theme for the event, it being his first world title in WWE, it just further elevated the briefcase as something that could create magic at any time and in so many unique ways. The match that this created is iconic, with the crowd being so against John Cena that I truly believe they would have rioted if RVD didn't leave as the dual WWE and ECW champion on that night. He was also just booked very well in general with the briefcase, and he even won the Intercontinental title while holding the briefcase. So he was presented as a main event guy, and it's unfortunate that the same magic was never captured again with him. But One Night Stand makes everything worth it, and the entire run just really helped elevate the briefcase, as well as RVD at that time, to show that this was an important concept and this was something that could really shift the landscape of WWE at any time. So yeah, that's why this is number 6 for me, and now we're going to move into the top 5. At number 5, we've got CM Punk from 2009, and I like this run with the Money in the Bank Punk slightly better, even though it was a little shorter than the first at 62 days. I really enjoyed how he essentially did the same thing he did last year, except this time he cashed in on Jeff Hardy and received a negative reaction as opposed to the previous year on Edge. The tension was at its highest for this cash-in, and you could believe for a second that Hardy could retain. This also led to the legendary Hardy and Punk feud over the world title, and while that didn't happen with the Money in the Bank involved, it was clear that the contract was being used to set up this amazing feud, and I do give it points for that with the long-term booking in mind. Punk is a top-tier briefcase holder in Money in the Bank history, and that's why he has 2 top 7 runs actually with the legendary stipulation. And so yeah, I just prefer this one more in general because it sets up and really ultimately does more for Punk than the first run did, because this led into the big heel run that eventually kind of catapulted him to another level. So, and I kind of just like the cash in on Hardy better just because the match is a little bit better than the Edge one, just because you could kind of buy that Hardy might retain, but ultimately Punk puts him down, and the crowd reaction was a little bit better. But yeah, that's why I have Punk at number 5 overall. Number 4 on the list is Big E, and this whole run was just such a breath of fresh air. Some fans have been waiting like an entire decade for them to do something more meaningful with Big E, and they finally pulled the trigger in 2021. People were thrilled to see him grab the contract and all that is typically promised with it, but the cash-in itself has become more about surprise moments for scheming heels or like uncharacteristically opportunistic baby faces, and Big E fit neither of those profiles really. So after 57 days with the contract, he tweeted that he'd be cashing in on Raw hours before the show went live, then picked his spot after an injured Bobby Lashley had retained the WWE Championship on the show. Far from squeaky clean, but the audience universally received it such as anyway. The cash-in and the feel-good moment makes this super special for me personally, as I was just a fan of Big E ever since his NXT Championship run many, many years ago. And this is also one of the last major things he did in the ring before the major neck injury that forced him out since 2022. And I'm not confident we'll ever see him wrestle again. So in a weird way, this also makes this run that much more special, because I'm glad I can at least go back and watch this and be happy that he got to this level like I knew he could. So in a weird way, that kind of makes this even kind of more personally elevated run for me, just because it's always a moment I can go back to and really, really enjoy and relish the fact that he actually did get to this moment and to this top of the mountain and win the title. So for me personally, just being a big fan of Big E, that's why this run and this contract length and the whole cash-in is so high for me, because personally I just really enjoyed it. So, and speaking of someone who Big E was associated with, at number 3 I have Dolph Ziggler. And originally I had this guy at number 2, but then I went back more and I actually looked and thought about it some more, and I just couldn't put him above the other 2 guys for a number of various reasons. Now, listen, his cash-in is I debate between him and number 1 as my favorite of all time. As a fan of Ziggler at the time and wondering why he wasn't being more utilized, and just wondering if he was ever going to even successfully cash in, the moment he pinned Del Rio for the 3, it was just glorious. The crowd, the energy, the commentary, the emotion. It was all just so incredible, and I loved it at the time, and I still love it looking back on it. Yeah, I just love it's an incredible moment. I love watching it back. However, his entire run of 267 days with the briefcase before the cash in was completely unremarkable, and they really did him no favors before his world title win. That's why this is still third and not higher, because the cash in does most of the heavy lifting, and it didn't really ascend Ziggler to the higher heights everyone hoped he would reach. However, this immediately became one of the loudest reactions in WWE history, and there weren't too many moments from the 2010s, and I would say just in general in WWE that really lived up to this one. Like, if you think of the biggest pops in WWE history, this is honestly has to be up there for like top 10, top 20, right in that area, at least for the past like 25 years. I mean, it is an incredible moment. It's just the perfect crowd for it too. The Raw after Mania, back when the Raw after Mania crowds were like just really into specific guys and big internet fans as opposed to now. Yeah, that's why this is number 3. Like I said, I originally had a number 2, but I just couldn't in good faith. I kind of went back, did some more research, and really couldn't put him over number 2. And that number 2 is Edge from 2005, the OG of the Money in the Bank, and definitely the most iconic holder of the briefcase. Edge parlayed an experimental stipulation into a career-altering persona, putting over the prestige of the Money in the Bank, the WWE Championship, and being an ultimate opportunist in one fell swoop. Tanking his own Intercontinental title match with Ric Flair in New Year's Resolution 2006 opener, Edge kept himself fresh and waited for the winner of the Elimination Chamber main event to pick his spot. John Cena was the winner, but bloodied and battered, he was easy pickings for Edge. This first run marked the coronation of the Rated R superstar and his first title reign. Obviously, that's huge. While short, this was the start of his career as a main eventer. As the first Money in the Bank holder, he did a lot to raise the profile of the briefcase as a desirable commodity, and in return, it helped to further his character and help him be more relevant. This run literally created the career of a legend in the business. It really cannot be understated how important this was in wrestling history, in my opinion. And I think objectively, he has the best case for being the best Money in the Bank holder. Like, if you just look at it from an objective point of view, like fact-based, he was the first. He parlayed this into a career as a main eventer and an eventual Hall of Famer and an icon in the industry. And it's just such an important run in not Money in the Bank briefcase history, but also just WWE history, wrestling history. I think objectively, he probably is the best one. For me, I have a personal bias for number 1. And I mean, I think if anybody knows their history of Money in the Bank or just in general, and his name hasn't been said, my number 1 is Seth Rollins. He's my personal favorite and objectively one of the best overall in general too. So just one of the best memories I've ever had in wrestling. I was watching WrestleMania with my brother when we were younger, when the insane cash-in happened. And it's one of my favorite wrestling memories ever. I was a huge Rollins guy when he was in the Shield, and the breakout and the breakup and then the breakout when he won the briefcase. And so that counts for a lot towards this landing on the top spot and being my favorite run with the Money in the Bank briefcase in general. Somebody was always going to get the honor of being the first to cash in during or after the main event of WrestleMania. And Seth Rollins was the perfect choice for the spot when he pulled off the heist of the century in 2015 after waiting 273 days to pick his ideal spot. Before that, he was very entertaining with the gold briefcase in general, and that helped us get his character over just to really establish that. And the fact that he cashed in at WrestleMania and ended the night in such an incredible fashion, complementing an already good match to make it iconic and with a satisfying ending for everyone to see, it was just perfect. It also immensely helped Rollins cement himself as a main eventer for years to come and an eventual WWE Hall of Famer. Personally, when someone brings up Money in the Bank, to me, my brain immediately goes to that gold briefcase in Seth Rollins' hands as he runs to the ring and cashes in at WrestleMania. So it's just the perfect use of the Money in the Bank, and my personal favorite of all time. I doubt it will ever be topped. It was just a culmination of a lot of factors that really just elevated this. I love everything they did with this briefcase. I love the moment it created, the talking points it created, the longevity of Rollins that it created. It was just honestly an unbelievable use of the briefcase to me. But that is going to do it for the entire list. Thank you for watching and taking the time to sit through this long video. I know it's a very long one, but it took a lot of time and a good amount of work. So if you could please leave me a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be appreciated. If you would like more wrestling content, you can subscribe to my podcast on all audio platforms. I release like some weekly coverage of the news and notes around the world of wrestling, the various matches that I watch, recommendations, things like that. You can also follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Pro Wrestling Bites, and you can also follow me on Twitter/X at PW Bites if you ever just want to talk wrestling or debate or send funny memes. I appreciate that. So, but yeah, thank you to everybody who watched, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.